What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have a collection update for you. And this one's going to be pretty sizable. This is going to cover the stuff that was given to us by Grand Vomit Records, Dystopian Dogs Records. I also got one sent to me by a band. There's some reissues in here. There's even some tapes, because those were sent to us too, but luckily I was able to find like streams of the material because I still don't own a tape player, and I'm still not fucking getting one. This one's gonna go all over the place in terms of extremes. I mean, we got gore grind and fucking grindcore and fucking death metal and thrash metal, and those are generally kind of expected here. Well, maybe not gore grind as much, but there's definitely a lot of it here. But there's also a big non-metal ending to this, and these were ones that I picked up just because another fellow YouTuber has been recommending them for a while, and I decided to snag them when I saw them. So this one should be a pretty interesting collection update, and well, let's just get right into it. First up, we have a split here from Berated and Barren, and this one came to us courtesy of Grand Vomit, which is going to start this off here. And this is the Chainsaw Death Cult split. This came out this year, again, on Grand Vomit Records, and both these bands are different, but kind of like similar just in terms of their approach. Now, I want to say we actually called this as being a grindcore release. I think even Jammin' John said, I have a feeling I would probably like this. I don't think he's got a chance to jam it yet, but I would say he was pretty much right, because this is just fucking awesome. And I'm still just talking about the Berated side here. The opening track in here, Violently High, which I think we've all been there before, just kicks this shit off fucking, well, violently. The vocals on here are very snarly. The guitars are just nasty sounding. It's very raw, but pretty well mixed. There are loads of blast beats on here because this is fucking grind, but there's some solid fucking hardcore grooves like the breakdown on Prime Real Estate. Now, surprisingly, I couldn't find this band in the archives, and I don't know why, because, I mean, it should be. Like, this seems like archived material. Like, it's pretty much flat out grindcore, and I don't know if they just don't cater to power violence on there, but I could have sworn I've seen some power violence bands on archives. Maybe they're just too new. Either way, they should be on there. The only issue I had with their side was the last track, Blast Off, which is just a fucking noise track, but it does have a fun sample of Frank Reynolds from Always Sunny in Philadelphia doing the whole I was just blasting with the two guns bit. I love Always Sunny in Philadelphia, so that shit was hilarious. But Berated, solid fucking band. And then Barren is a flat-out grindcore band from Belgium, and this band has the HM2 tone, and it's like an HM2 tone times fucking 10. So naturally, I fucking loved it. This is like pretty much in the same vein as bands like fucking Rotten Sound. It is just visceral. The opening track, Nail Them While They're Vulnerable, which that song title can be taken a lot of different ways, is very just straight up Swedish death metal. Like, it's slower, it's brooding, and then it gets into the just, you know, nasty fucking visceral blast beats and fucking like just disgusting hardcore grooves. Just a nasty fucking listen from start to finish on their side. I think it'd almost be fair to call this death grind because of the amount of death metal fucking riffs on their side of the split. But either way, this split is fucking awesome. I only had, again, a minor issue with just a noise track being on there because I'm just not into like flat out noise, but the songs on here, the ones that are actually like constructed to just pummel the living fuck out of your eardrums, are amazing. This is just some sick shit. I had a hunch I would dig this one. I was fucking right. This is just fucking awesome. So thank you to Grand Vomit for sending us this one in particular, because this might be my favorite one out of the bunch. I don't know. There's some other good shit in here too, but yeah, definitely check out this split. I think both bands fucking rule, so yeah, good stuff. All right, we have another split here from two bands from two very different sides of the world here. We have Gore with their side, which is Spawn of Scatological Infinity, and we have the band Cannibe or Cannibe. They're from Italy. I can't pronounce their name right, but their side is called Man Is What He Eats, and I think this is two separate albums combined. It might be a full-on split, but they both have different artwork. Like, this is the Gore side, and then in here we have the Cannibe, I'm sorry. We have that side. Anyway, looking into both of these bands, they are very prolific in that whole like sort of mincecore sort of thing where they just put out split and demo and EP after split, demo, and EP. In fact, I think between both bands, they have over 100 splits, so it's pretty fucking industrious. Now, both of these bands can be described as gore grind. I want to say Cannibe, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep fucking that up. They have a little bit more death metal to their sound, but Gore right away is just flat out gore grind. Lots of early Carcass vibes. It's very murky. It has some really solid riffs in it, tons of blasts. The vocals though, and believe me, I'm going to be bringing up vocals a lot when it comes down to gore grind just because they are some of the most over the top vocals, I think, in metal. I'm not even sure they're human. Like, I kept looking at this and was like, is there a bear in the band? Because it sounds like a bear gnawing on the fucking microphone. It legit sounds like this dude is saying the same word over and over and over again. And I'm not entirely sure what that word is. But the music itself, again, very raw production. I like the riffs. There's some solid fucking riffs in here. Again, some of that early Carcass worship kind of coming through. The drums do have a little bit of that pingy snare, and they're not terribly well mixed, but this is gore grind. Like, generally gore grind tries to be as raw and as gross as possible. And believe me, they got it. I mean, they have some pretty nasty song titles. Submerged in Diarrhea. That sounds fucking awful. But overall, not bad. I mean, you know, for gore grind, I'm not like the best judge on that, but this was still really entertaining. Now, Cannibe or Cannibe, I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep apologizing for that because I'm probably continuously mispronouncing that. This band is definitely more on like the Mortician side, I guess. Drum machine, lots of samples, very gross sounding. The vocals are horrifying. Like, there are shrieks, growls, gurgles. They're all very distorted. It's very unsettling sounding at times. Like, this almost feels like the one-man black metal fucking approach to gore grind. Like, it sounds like this was all done in a room while the dude just shrieked and puked and fucking snarled into a microphone, and they just recorded some fucking, like, really raw guitars. But there's that whole aspect of not taking itself too seriously. You know, the song titles definitely reflect that. Again, the vocals reflect that because it sounds like a feral pig and a bullfrog and a hyena kind of combined. So overall, like, I really was entertained by this. Like, it was fun. It was just kind of like gloriously over the top. And there were some like kind of blackened moments on here on, oh boy, we're gonna read some song titles. Cranium Ripping Cerebral Melanoma, and Brutal Anal Assassination on Crohn's Diseased Guts. You can almost smell the romance in the air on that one. But there are tons of great song titles in here, and by great, I mean just fucking gross. Horrendous Gastric Juice Steel Straw Bypass to Face Burning. Pierced to death with her own cracked deboned femur, which... That they deboned the bone? Like, what are they stabbing her with then? I'm like, there's no bone because you're and never mind. Agony of being gagged and hanged with her own large intestine. That's a lot of fucking work there. And why not pepper in one more? Injecting narcotics with her eyeballs fluids. Maybe some of that was lost in translation, but we get what you mean there. And yeah, man, it's a different kind of penetration there. Anyway, some pretty fun shit in here. Like, admittedly, gore grind really isn't my thing, but I kind of appreciate it for its just over-the-top nature. And admittedly, it is kind of fun, albeit, like, not well produced and just kind of, like, musically, like, they're just kind of doing whatever. But at the same time, I appreciate them for going all out trying to make the most noisy, fucking twisted shit ever. So yeah, that was at least fun in that aspect. Again, I'm going to leave links to all the music down below. I urge you to check it out. Just form your own opinions. It's fucking wild. I mean, the song titles alone will probably keep you coming back. And depending on your sense of humor, you might really appreciate some of it. I don't know, my sense of humor is pretty fucked up, so a lot of this shit I was definitely giggling at. But yeah, definitely check out the split, check out both bands. They got a fucking ton of splits to check out if you like them, so yeah, just check them out. All right, we have yet another split here, and this is definitely some more gore grind. So we have Golem of Gore and Lipoma. Now, Golem of Gore is a gore grind / gore noise. I don't think I've ever heard that term before, but that is what it said in terms of their description. But they are from Italy, and they love noisy gore grind and samples. It actually opens up with a sample that I'm not sure what was going on there. Like, it sounds like some dude violently busting a nut and then crying about it. But it's probably something else. In fact, some of the samples on here, I couldn't tell if I was, like, you know, hearing stuff from, like, classic fucking porn or Italian horror. Like, the lines are kind of blurred there because I think the people are making kind of close to the same noises. It's either vinegar strokes or death strokes. I'm not entirely sure. But musically, this is pretty much what I expected when I saw the words Gore noise. Oh, I don't know if I actually said the name of the split. This does actually have a name. It is Stench of Organs and Purulence Rapidly Decomposing. So get ready for some carcass love here, because Golem Gore definitely shows it off right away. The vocals are very much that Bill Steer pitch corrected fucking gurgle. Drums are very loud. The guitars are raw and muddy, but honestly, they're kind of riffy, and it kind of has that old school carcass vibe where buried in the mud, there are some riffs. Like, this isn't quite like Symphonies of Sickness. This is definitely still Reek, but it's done pretty well. I do think the snare is like a little bit loud in the mix, but I mean, well, the mix itself isn't that great. But again, if you're going after that reek of putrefaction sound, well, the mix probably isn't going to sound that good. Musically, though, it's pretty solid. Again, it's kind of like an old school sort of like gore grind vibe that doesn't sound very modern at all. It's violent, it's gross, it's maybe a little bit perverse too. There's a song on here called Secreting Sperm Into, and then we have an ellipses, so choose your own path to adventure. But I'm pretty sure they chose their path because the next track is literally called An Open Wounded Corpse. So, yeah, leave it to your imagination on that one where they went. Sounds like they cracked open a cold one, so to speak. So the next side is one-man gore grind project Lipoma, and this band is from New York City. And this one was kind of the surprise, and we're going to go into that a little bit more because we actually got a full length from them. And this might be some of the catchiest gore grind I think I've heard. Like, this is very riffy and centered on hooks, but it still has all the tropes of gore grind with like a ridiculous drum machine and just these stupid sewer gurgle vocals that are absolutely fucking ridiculous. Like, he legit sounds like he is barfing into a fucking walkie-talkie on here. But holy shit, dude, like, we have thrashy riffs. There's some moments on here that I would even call kind of Sabbathy, but it's still 100% like gore grind, and it sounds filthy and fucking deranged as hell, but admittedly, like, this is really fucking catchy. And if there wasn't enough carcass worship in these song titles on Golem Gore, there's plenty in these song titles for Lipoma. Like the last track here, Liberation of Pancreatic Acids in the Final Stages of Fat Necrosis. That sounds carcassy as fuck. There's a lot of other ones here, but man, they are loaded with a ton of words that I just am gonna have difficulty pronouncing because we love all the medical pathological gore here. But that last track even includes like some black metal moments, and like this band kind of shocked me with, again, riffs and melodies that are very distinct and not necessarily something you would expect in gore grind, but still being like definitely 100% gore grind. So yeah, both these bands are really interesting, but Lipoma was the one that really caught me. I definitely recommend checking out this split though. Like, if you're a fucking gross gore hound and you just love early carcass worship, and if you're just a sick fucking gore grind fan, you're probably gonna love this. Both bands very different, and they have something they kind of bring to the table that I think is fun and unique. So yeah, definitely check this split out. This was pretty fucking solid. Lipoma. Horrors of Pathology. Told you we were going to get back to this band, and yeah, I was corrected in terms of the cover. That's fucking real. That is a tumor, or multiple tumors. That's a lot. I don't know. Dude looks like a melted candle, and I feel very bad for him. Anyway, this is the first full length from this band. They actually have like 4 EPs and then some multiple demos. This is a one-man gore grind act, as I said before, Max Pierce. He's also in a band called Boar Taint, and I couldn't find anything on it, but I wanted to actually say that band name out loud because that's fucking hilarious. But pretty much everything I said about the split, or at least their side of the split, is true on this. This is the catchiest gore grind I have ever listened to. Again, the vocals, sewer gurgles and fucking barfs, but holy shit, dude, the riff work on here is stupid catchy, like thrash metal, flat out death metal, melodic death metal. There's a little bit of black metal atmosphere to some of these. The drum machine on here is, you know, kind of obnoxious, but, you know, that's just kind of part of it. But, like, legit, these songs are really fucking well done and are very intricate and kind of, like, not the norm in gore grind, at least as far as my experience in terms of just getting into gore grind. And I'm not, again, the biggest gore grind fan, but this project has found some really like interesting territory here. Like, some of this is maybe more akin to like a band like Lockup or the Berserker, especially with that drum machine, albeit I think their drum machine sounds better than the Berserker's drum machines ever did. But I like how this album mixes it up in terms of styles. Like, not all of this just kind of fits into that gore grind box as far as like just riff construction and even song construction and dynamics. Like the song The Limits of Mortality is kind of like got a sleazy fucking Motorhead vibe to it. The title track has a ton of fucking like great melodies, and it's over 5 minutes long. That's almost unheard of in gore grind. There's a lot of groove. There are tremolo harmonies. There are like, again, like actual melodies to latch onto, but it never really loses that intense, just sort of visceral fucking energy. It gives you smart hooks to listen to. Like, it's not just about the gore and atmosphere. Like, this is really well done just in terms of like constructing melodies. And melody in a subgenre where, you know, melody is kind of just looked at like, well, I mean, we could, but we also have this sample of someone being ripped apart by a fucking grizzly bear. And I don't know, that just sounds cooler. And I still get all the fucking gory song titles too, like Symphonies of Syphilis. See, I told you they love Carcass. Hopefully not syphilis. Fecal Occult Blood. It sounds like you're building a cult around the wrong thing. This really kind of caught me off guard. Like, I kept looking at the album cover and listening to the music like, hey, am I hearing this right? Is this the right CD? I mean, it definitely is in terms of like the vocals and the drum machine, but man, dude, this is fucking catchy as hell. This was probably my biggest surprise when it came to the Grand Vomit package, just because I was just expecting, you know, the standard fare for gore grind, and this turned out to be really fucking good, like super fucking catchy. Definitely recommend checking this out. This is solid. Like, this is really good, and I'm not just saying like, yeah, I mean, if you're a gore grind fan, you'll love it. Honestly, I think if you just like death metal and extreme metal in general, you're gonna find some stuff you're gonna like on here, because again, these riffs on here, the song construction, like it's really fucking impressive, and again, kind of outside of the box of gore grind. So I guess they let the rotten guts sort of spill out of the, you know, foul box of fucking innards and shit. I don't know, there's like a parallel I can make there, but I don't know if I'm doing it that well. The main thing is, definitely check this out. This was really fucking good. Tormentous Demo 2022 AD. Any guess when this came out? So yes, I have a tape in my hand, and it feels weird holding a tape in my hand, but this is the first demo from this Detroit-based death grind act. This was given to us through the Dystopian Dogs package, and this is just a very raw, nasty death grind project. Very raw, and there's a good reason. It's mostly just a live rehearsal that they just wanted to get out there. I mean, like, literally, like, the name of the demo is written on there in Sharpie, but they definitely packaged it well, and I kind of like the almost Voivodish logo on there. But musically, this is more akin to like early Napalm Death, Propulsion. Like, there is a bit of death metal to it, but mostly I would say it's a lot of grind. This is definitely like early grindcore and just like a bit of death metal. The vocals kind of switch between shrieks and low gurgles. The music is just chaotic. Like, they are just fucking going as fast and as fucking heavy as they can. And unfortunately, with the production on here, a lot of that is kind of lost. If this was actually like, you know, legit mixed, because I think this was just them like just hitting the tape deck and fucking recording, like at least that's how it sounds, which definitely gives you a good sense of how intense they are live, all 8 minutes of this and 5 tracks. Now, of course, me not having a tape deck and me also not getting a tape deck, because I ain't gonna, I had to actually stream this one on YouTube, and I don't know if there's any drop off in quality, but then again, this is a tape, so I think that's pretty much what it's gonna sound like anyway. But very raw, but still pretty good. In fact, I really liked the last track, Cleaved in Two. Like, there was a little bit more groove to it. The riff really stood out. It wasn't just the continuous, like, machine gun fucking blaring guitars. But yeah, I wouldn't mind actually hearing more by this band, because I kind of like the overall intense energy. Like, of course, the production was kind of but still, this was really good. So yeah, if you have never checked this out, this is some pretty fucking nasty, raw shit, and I would say definitely a band to watch out for in the future, because I wouldn't mind hearing more. So yeah, check it out. Germfask Camp No. 135. This is the first demo from this Lansing, Michigan-based, let's see, say death metal / noise act. This is very interesting in a lot of ways. Musically, this is, I mean, kind of that like old school, like kind of Godflesh sound, like in terms of like the power electronics and noise, but there's also big like cavernous death metal moments and even like grindcore fits on here. So it's kind of all over the place in terms of the extreme metal spectrum. But what I thought was really interesting is, you know, looking over the track list on here, which again, I don't own a tape player, which is why this is still sealed. But as luck would have it, once again, this was on YouTube, so I was able to listen to it. And I noticed that all of the tracks were people's names. And I was like, that's interesting. And I guessed when we did the unboxing, looking at the album cover, I was like, maybe this is like some Lovecraftian stuff. Like it's got some, you know, creepy tentacled whatever coming out of there. It looks very cosmic horror-ish. And then looking into it, I was really wrong. This is fiercely political and an interesting stance on anti-authoritarianism. The names are of people that were in concentration/work camps in the US. During World War II, there were a fair amount of conscientious objectors to the war that were forced into work camps, and they were pretty much slave labor. And I didn't really know much about that. Like, generally my World War II knowledge, you know, when I studied in high school, we didn't cover that, probably with good reason. There's a lot of stuff we didn't cover in terms of history in school, just because, well, that might make people upset if they knew that was true. Me being me, I would rather know the dark, ugly truth to something rather than being told a comforting lie, or simply just kind of ignoring it and pretending it didn't happen. Nothing fucking gets solved that way. But I think that theme kind of works with the music because it's very unsettling. Like, there's just this sort of just dark atmosphere to it. But again, it's not all like dissonance and noise. Like, there are lots of really good riffs on here and really clever song construction. I had never heard of this band up until we just got this, and I already want a CD version of this because this is a tape and I don't like them. Now, I don't know if there is a CD version, but believe me, I'm going to campaign for it because I think this is absolutely awesome. There's a lot going on here and it all works together, and this atmosphere, the themes, everything is just kind of coming together in this very dark, unsettling listen, and it's fucking awesome. This is just fucking killer stuff. If you've never heard of this band, much like I had never heard of this band, I recommend checking them out. It's a just dark, twisted listen. Thank you, Dystopian Dogs, for sending us this. This is probably one of my favorite things you guys sent us. This is absolutely incredible. So yeah, definitely check this out. Fucking monster of a dark listen. Ferum, Asunder, Erode. This is the first full length from this Italian death doom act, and I noticed that when we pulled up the art for this, that there was completely different art, and that is because this isn't just on tape. And while I appreciate that Dystopian Dog sent us a tape version of this, once I heard it, I'm like, I'm gonna get the CD because I know it's available. So I'm gonna put this down, and we're gonna match up artwork in here because this is Paolo Girardi's artwork and it's fucking awesome. I like literally love everything he's done so far. That Mother of Graves album cover is incredible. I could go on because he's done a fuck ton here lately. While this is death doom, I think it leans a little bit more towards death metal itself. Lots of slow plodding riffs, but there's a sort of aggression to them. Like there's like a 90s death metal sound all over this. Definitely very akin to Incantation. In fact, I would say their vocalist and guitarist, Samantha, she's almost like the female version of John McEntee in a way. She has a very dramatic, very over-the-top evil delivery. Her vocals are very raw, and the riff work on here is absolutely awesome. It balances out like death metal brutality and doom metal fucking just bleakness. The song Monolithic Acquiescence is possibly my favorite song on here. It kind of works that old school Black Sabbath tritone. It's almost funeral doom slow, and it just sounds evil as fuck. But again, the thing I like on here is that sort of balance between death metal and doom metal. Like they kind of play really well with both parts, and both sections are very distinct. Like when the song Entrails of Linnahall, I don't know what that song is a reference to. Great doomy sections, but there's lots of blast beats and more up-tempo sections to sort of play off them. There's great peaks and valleys on this album, and that made this a really engaging listen. I did think the outro was kind of interesting, and this is all in Italian, so I'm gonna butcher this. Spesso il mal di vivere ho incontrato. I probably should have looked up what that actually meant, but I didn't. Anyway, it's just kind of a weird outro track where it's like more ambient noise, like there's someone hitting something, and I don't know what it is, but you have a spoken word by Samantha on here, and again, I'm sure if I actually understood what she was saying, it would have more effect, but her delivery on here, and maybe the fact that it is in Italian, it does make it sound very creepy and very forlorn. But at the same time, this kind of feels like just something tagged at the end, because the rest of this album is just fucking great. Like, there's good atmosphere in here, there's good build up to stuff. But the end of this, I don't know, kind of left me like wanting a little bit more. Like, this kind of feels like it would be like an interlude track in between tracks, and then let, you know, like some of the more monstrous tracks like Monolithic Acquiescence be like a giant closer on here. Outside of that, really no complaints on here. Like, this is just disgusting death doom. Again, very riffy, lots of 90s death metal tropes on here. Excellent fucking album. Definitely check this out if you've never heard of them. And again, thank you to Dystopian Dogs for sending us the tape version of this. Really appreciate it. CD was definitely an upgrade, but ended up getting 2 copies of this fucking awesome band. So thank you guys for bringing this band to my attention, and I would say check this band out on either tape or CD or LP. Whatever your preferred fucking physical media is, definitely check them out. This is fucking awesome. Isenblast, Screams in Cold Silence. This is the debut full-length from this Detroit-based black metal act. This is my first exposure to them, and looking them up in archives, I was trying to see if like there are any like bands that they have been in that I knew, and I didn't really come across any, but I thought it was interesting that they had 2 drummers listed on this album, but I think they only have 1 on here in terms of the actual liner notes. And another thing I saw is apparently they were supposed to have a second album out, but there was a hard drive crash with all their music and they lost all of it. So that fucking sucks. But this came out in 2017, and this is some pretty solid black metal. I will say the production is a little rough in here. It sounds very muffled, and I can kind of understand like if they're going for that more raw black metal sound in terms of like, you know, second wave, Norway. You'd probably kind of want that, but I think this band kind of goes all over the map as far as black metal. Like, you have some more epic, more like intricate stuff, more akin to Emperor, but you also have the more raw stuff that's more akin to like, you know, Transylvanian Hunger or like, you know, Marduk and stuff like that. It's melodic at times, it's thrashy at times. The song Altars of Blood sounds like Celtic Frost, so I feel like they kind of just checked off like almost every style of black metal they could and put it on here. And musically, I think they execute it really well. Most of my issues here are with the production, like the vocals, for instance. While they definitely fit the style in terms of black metal is kind of a roundabout thing, they do sound like a man shrieking into a bucket. And it kind of took me out of it, because I feel like with all the different styles they're doing on here, the vocals could adapt to them a little bit more, and they're kind of just uniform across the entire release. Because there are a lot of cool riffs and dynamics, especially the song I, Lucifer. That song, awesome riffs, awesome melodies. There's almost like, again, like Emperor-like dynamics to the song itself. A lot of this I thought was really good. Just, you know, production-wise, maybe they kind of went a little bit more towards the raw side, and I think it kind of hampered it a bit, again, considering what all they're doing on here. This is really solid, and I'm hoping they actually do get around to doing a second album. I kind of would like to see like what direction they're going to go on that next album, because again, this one is sort of like a mishmash of different types of black metal kind of done by one band, and overall it works really well, and they do excel at pretty much everything on here. I'm just kind of wondering like if the next one will be like a little bit more uniform overall in terms of like finding one particular style. Me being a bigger fan of like Emperor and of course just old school Celtic Frost stuff, I would love to hear more of that, but either way, I would definitely check out more by this band in the future if they choose to put out another album. Hopefully they didn't get too discouraged by losing their second album on a hard drive, and they're actually out there writing some stuff and kind of recapturing what they did on that second album, or maybe even starting fresh. Honestly, I'm very curious because I want to hear more. Either way, I'm definitely interested in checking out more by this band. So yeah, definitely check them out. Solid stuff. Zombie Preachers of Gore, the full Regurgitation. This is a 2022 compilation of, I believe, literally everything this band has ever done. This is a Michigan-based gore grind / death grind act, and literally my first experience with them. And I think when Dystopian Dogs got a hold of us, this was the initial band that they wanted us to go over, and then they just sent us a bunch of other cool stuff, which was really awesome of them. And when I heard the sample of the music, they said, I was like, this kind of sounds like Mortician, and I'm kind of all about that sort of over-the-top shit. And this was a pretty fun listen. Like, again, we have pretty much, I think, everything they've done. Let's see. Orgy of Blood basement tapes, that's from 1989. God's Vomit outtakes and rehearsals from 1990. We have the God's Vomit EP or full length. I'm not entirely sure what they consider that, maybe a demo. And then the self-titled album from 1991. And all of them are kind of different. The self-titled one from 91 actually has like a real drummer, and holy shit, this thing's raw. Like the guitar tone actually crackles, the bass is fucking ridiculous, And well, the drums kind of sit a little too far back in that mix for me, but it's very much the, you know, Repulsion style of drumming where you just play as fast and as hard as you can and you just hope the kit doesn't press charges. I think out of everything, despite the production here, this was some of my favorite stuff, especially the amazing like Autophagy style groove on Cremated Alive and just the flat out killer hooks that are on the song Gutfuck, which I was informed by one of the members of the band that says, yeah, Gutfuck is definitely our Freebird. Like, thematically, this is definitely gore grind, but in terms of, like, just the overall style, like, this just has that sort of, like, punky fucking grind sound. Like, it's just flat-out grindcore. Now, the God's Vomit demo actually has a drum machine on it, and well, I mean, it's a pretty obnoxious drum machine, but it was just interesting to hear how much they changed in 1 year in terms of, like, their overall sound, because this sounds more akin to a lot of the gore grind that I've heard in terms of that just, you know, frantic drum machine and just super distorted fucking guitars and even more distorted vocals on top. Now, I think the guitar tone is maybe like a little bit better on God's Vomit, but overall, I just kind of liked the overall sound on the self-titled one from 91. Now, the Orgy of Blood Basement Tapes one, it's just pretty much their rehearsals and such, and honestly, I kind of liked that version of the song Electric Death, which is on God's Vomit, better on the Basement Tapes. Like, that just sounds like a fucking gnarly punk show. Except there's no crowd screaming, but I imagine they probably would be because that song fucking absolutely whoops ass. It's very over the top. It's a lot of fucking fun. It's very loose. And then the outtakes are pretty interesting too because we have all the alternate versions of the song Crack Whore. Alt 1, Alt 2, Alt 3, and then a different version of Gutfuck simply called Another Fucked Gut? Question mark? I don't know. This was really cool. Like, I really dig this. This is just some fiercely underground, just gore worshipping fucking death grind, grindcore, gore grind. I don't know. It's a lot of fucking fun. I know that much. If these guys are like back together and gonna record something new, I would definitely check it out. I wouldn't mind hearing this with like some better production, but you know, I don't want any of that intensity lost. And I'm hoping, you know, it's not a drum machine because, you know, drum machines are fine. I'm like not the biggest fan of them, but the real drums that were on the self-titled, I really like that. And just hearing like the more live stuff towards the end, I don't know, I think that's the whole vibe that, you know, just really kind of completes the overall fucking gross feel. Thank you again, Dystopian Dogs, for sending some more cool shit our way, and this was a lot of fucking fun. So yeah, if you're a Mortician, Carcass, Autophagy fan, definitely check this out. This is just fucking gross, but in a good way. Detestation, Renewed Killings. This is the second album from this New Mexico-based death metal slash brutal death metal slash death grind act. This is also the first album in like 30 years from this band. I had never heard of them, but luckily one of our viewers is one of the members of this, and he actually sent me a copy of this as well as a cool note. Hey man, thanks for checking our CD out. Hope you dig it and can review it on your kick-ass channel. Love it, thanks, Tommy T. And that is Tommy T. Rapasardi, who is, I think, maybe the sole member on here. I'm not entirely sure. Like, looking this up, I really only saw, like, him listed as the main guy behind almost everything on here. I think there were some other members that were involved, but it kind of makes sense because this does sound like a one-man project. This does have a drum machine. I am probably going to bitch about that because I'm just not the biggest fan of drum machines, but this, I don't know, like, it's kind of hard to describe. Like, it's definitely a lot of thrash metal on here. There's some groove metal, too. Death metal, of course, and I think grindcore is on here, but it's very minimal. Like, most of this, I would say, is more like death metal centric. The vocals on here are kind of interesting because they're all kind of like garbled, like almost like industrial metal. Like, it sounds like someone is trying to repeat back your order through a broken fucking intercom at a drive-thru. Honestly, I think if there were real drums on here, I don't think it would work as well, but with a drum machine, it kind of gives it that sort of like industrial, like almost kind of Godflesh sort of vibe. So it kind of works. But classifying this overall, it's kind of difficult because there's a lot of different elements on here. Like, you have like hardcore D beats on the song Useless Morons, and it definitely has like almost kind of a hardcore meets death metal sound. Torture Tactics is more full-on just death metal, and then Disemboweled has a flat-out like doom metal start to it. So like there's like a little bit of like autopsy to it. But I feel like it's very meat potatoes, and there's nothing really wrong with that, but I feel like there was kind of room to like spice up the riffs a little bit with all the different elements I'd like to play off of. And admittedly, I don't like the clean vocals on here. Like, Try to Kill Me has clean vocals on it. It kind of feels like more of a standard like kind of groove metal song. but they're very flat. Like, they really don't do much for the song. And honestly, like, I think you could have just got away with just doing harsh vocals on that and probably would have been a stronger, more intense song. But I do like there's like some like self-aware fucking fun on here. Like the song Gut Her Gutter. I don't even know what that means. What if she has gutter guards? What are you gonna do then? I feel like that's an obstacle you didn't account for there. But I mean, I like the actual song title. Like, you know, there's some fun shit in here. Like Useless Morons is pretty fucking hilarious too. But the odd throwback that I wasn't expecting were the last two tracks, which are remixes. And generally I don't hear like remixes done very often. Like these are like the Fear Factory style, like remix album sort of remixes. Like these are like the more industrial sounding tracks where there's like actual DJs involved in terms of like mixing it up and kind of making it have a different life. And they do a remix of Spawn of Evil, which is Dark the Keeper remix. And then the last track is the second track in their title track, Renewed Killings, which is Dark the Keeper Black Industrial remix. And I mean, both of them kind of sound like, you know, Goth Night, sort of like, you know, heavier songs. Like, they're a little bit more danceable, but they're still kind of like, you know, a metal groove to them. The results there are kind of mixed, and it does feel like kind of dated. Like, this is something I would definitely expect more in like the late 90s and early 2000s. As for now, I mean, it's just kind of there. Like, I mean, they're okay for remixes, but I really wasn't into them. Overall, though, this wasn't too bad. Like, this is just kind of meat potatoes. It's brutal. It's got some killer riffs. I think the guitar tone in here fucking is really interesting and really fucking snarly. I dig it. But I definitely think there's room to like kind of broaden out the songs. And there's some serious standouts in here. Like I really do like Torture Tactics and Disemboweled. I think those are really solid tracks. But I think there's definitely room to kind of expand the sound a little bit. I mean, first album in 30 years. There's probably some rust to shake off. You kind of want to get a feel for it again. And honestly, I'd be down to hear another one from this band. So once again, thank you very much, Tommy, for sending me this. And of course, there is a link down below to check this one out, as there is for all of these. But yeah, pretty decent stuff. So yeah, check it out. Morbid Angel, Abominations of Desolation. This is the, well, original versions of Morbid Angel songs with Mike Browning in it. Now, this actually came out in 1991. We didn't count this in the ranking because this is essentially the demos that would become the bulk of the material that was on Altars of Madness, and then eventually later albums, because they would re-record a lot of the stuff with David Vincent in the band, and even one with Steve Tucker in the band, I believe. But this is the early stuff from the death metal legends that are Morbid Angel. This is with Mike Browning on drums and vocals, and I believe David Vincent was involved in the production, but he didn't actually play on this, and that was John Ortega on bass. And this is pretty awesome. I've been like kind of like holding off on getting this one just because like, I mean, for me, Morbid Angel starts at Altars, and you know, that's awesome because that fucking debut rules. But this is actually really good too. Like, it's different, like mainly because Sandoval's drum style is very different than Mike Browning's. Mike Browning still plays very aggressively, but not like Sandoval aggressively. And Mike's vocals in here are really killer, but they have more of a thrash vibe to him. When David Vincent entered the band, he had like an instant style of vocal that just resonated with death metal. Like his delivery was a little bit lower, he enunciated everything well, and he sounded sinister and evil. Like this has more of a thrash bite, and a lot of these songs do have more of a thrashy fucking style to them. It was really cool to hear like these early versions of songs. I think the only song that hasn't been re-recorded by the band is the song Demon Seed, which is really fucking good. And honestly, I kind of prefer the original version of Angel of Disease. Like that song always kind of stood out to me on Covenant, just being like that more thrashy song on there. And David Vincent sounds great in it, but I think Mike Browning sounds better in this version because like the overall vibe of it is it's a little bit more of a thrash metal song than it is a death metal song. I pretty much just got this to patch up the hole in the discography because I've been thinking about getting this one. I jammed some tracks like, hey, you know what, why not? I mean, granted, I feel like I do own these songs because technically I do, except for Demon Seed. But it is kind of cool hearing the different versions of them. And overall, this is really fucking good. So if you've never jammed this, which I mean, I imagine most Morbid Angel fans have, even I did before getting this, I would say check this out. It's very different, but it's, you know, really fucking good. And Mike Browning does a fucking killer job on this. In hindsight, I kind of wonder if we should have ranked this one in our Morbid Angel ranking, but I also have this fear that Jam and John would have ranked this one maybe over Altars of Madness, and then we'd be talking about how John ranked Altars of Madness at number 7. 6 was already bad enough. Anyway, definitely check this album out. Really solid listen. Power from Hell, Shadow's Devouring Light. This is the 7th album from this Brazilian black metal / black and thrash metal act. I think they've definitely shifted way over to black metal in this one because I really didn't get a lot of thrashiness. I've known about this band for a while. I just hadn't picked up anything by them. And then I got a shirt for them in the Metalhead box. I was like, well, that's a sure sign I need to actually own some of this band. And I was definitely intrigued by the cover because I really wasn't sure what was going on there because a lot of things are kind of like dark and hard to make out. But I don't know, I was a little weirded out because when I saw like her mouth open for the communion wafer, I was wondering what it was that was actually handing her that. Like, I thought it was like some demonic dick, and I was like, is this going full fucking hentai? But I think it's like a tentacle, which is still kind of hentai-ish. But anyway, musically, again, this is definitely more black metal. There's not a lot of thrashiness to it, though it does have like lots of blasts. It's way more atmospheric than I was expecting. Again, I was kind of like geared for something a little bit thrashier. I would say this kind of feels like, you know, Satyricon circa like Nemesis Divina, and maybe like a more modern band like Garia. I'm not entirely sure I'm saying that band's name right ever, but it's kind of similar to that. Like, it has that dark, dissonant atmosphere. It's very cold. It's very haunting. Like, this sounds fucking evil. And I suppose if your band's name is Power from Hell, and I'm hoping they're actually referencing the awesome Onslaught album, you should sound evil. And they definitely have that covered on the title track. I think that's one of the best ones on here. Like, the dissonant melodies in particular just sound haunting. Like, it's not like a lush sort of sound. It's just like, wow, that sounds creepy. But this whole album, I think, is really good. It's very catchy. It's very well paced. It doesn't really overdo any like aspect on here. Like, I do think it is like a little in love with the reverb, but it kind of works with the more atmospheric sound. But it's not just a wall of blast beats all the time. There's lots of groovy pockets. There's a lot of melody too. Like, it's very fucking catchy. Like, I love the opening riff on Summoning the Abdication. It is immediately like epically evil. And then Mother of Abominations does have like a little thrashy nod to it. I think it's kind of like the lone isolated spot, but the rest of this is really cool. I really fucking dug this. This is really solid. I definitely want to go back and get some of their earlier stuff. I mean, I got like 6 albums to actually check out by them. But I know, I kind of want to hear the more thrashy stuff just to see like how awesome they were at that. I've definitely heard a fair amount of praise heaped upon this band in terms of their earlier work, so I'm definitely down to check it out. But yeah, this is really good. This is just solid fucking black metal. It's nice and creepy and evil, and I fucking dug it. So yeah, if you like your black metal steeped in evil but really fucking catchy, definitely check this out. Autophagy Bacteriophage. This is the debut full-length from this Portland death metal act. Features current and ex-members of bands like Ritual Necromancy, Bell Witch, Sempiternal Dusk, and Bastard Feast. I've actually seen a lot of people comment, say, hey, are you gonna go over this album? And it's like, I'm still waiting on my copy. Like, it took a little bit to get here. I definitely intended on going over it, and I thought about doing a review for it, but we just didn't have time. But here it is, and yeah, no, this is fucking awesome. This is just straight up old school grimy death metal, very much in the vein of bands like Witch Vomit, which that's pretty much a neighbor of theirs, and I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't share a member with there because there's a lot of bands in Portland that share a lot of fucking members there. The guitar tone in here is absolutely sick. It is thick, it's chunky, it's just a little bit murky, but man, it's just fucking powerful. I think the production here overall is great. It's very raw, old school sounding, but it's mixed well. Like, the levels are fucking great. Everything comes across crisp. The vocals carry over it and they're nice and fucking grimy. It just sounds like a undead fucking ogre. Like, that's literally perfect for, I think, what this band was going for. It's driven by fucking catchy riffs. There's D-beats, there's blasts. There are sick Death Doom breakdowns in here, especially on Eviscerator Remains, the title track, and They Saw Him Becoming, which is not a Pantera cover. I was actually looking at the track listing, I was like, dude, I'm just kind of curious if they could pull off a Pantera cover doing this style of death metal, because I don't know, I think it'd be kind of cool. But it wasn't. It was just awesome fucking death metal / death doom. Lots of incantation worship on here, and definitely like earlier incantation, like more of the 90s stuff. Pretty much this embodies like everything I like about just nasty old school death metal in a new band. It's just riffy as hell, it's catchy, lots of groove. It's still meat and potatoes, but how they organize everything is just for like maximum impact, and it's just fucking awesome. I'm a sucker for old school death metal, and these guys are fucking doing it right. If you have not checked out this debut, holy shit, you're missing out on another fucking killer death metal album that came out this year, in a litany of killer death metal albums. In fact, I would say like this back half of this year has been just fucking loaded with really good death metal. And gonna make making a year-end list very difficult, because the more I jam this, like, oh man, this has definitely got a chance too. But yeah, this is a fucking monstrous start to a fucking new act in Portland. Like, they needed more death metal bands. I mean, I'm biased. I say they do need more death metal bands so I can keep buying all the death metal releases that come out of there. But yeah, definitely check this one out. It's a fucking monstrous debut and is just pure old school death metal glory. What's not to love there? Check it out. Black Magnet, Body Prophecy. This is the second album from this Oklahoma-based one-man industrial act. Came out this year on $20 spin. We actually reviewed their debut album, Hallucination Scene, when it dropped, and I was really interested in this one because when I heard tracks leading up to it, it was like, dude, this sounds like fucking Godflesh, and I'm a sucker for fucking Godflesh. This is raw, very like kind of power electronics driven, like industrial metal. It's very heavy. And I would say this one might be like a little bit more up-tempo and even heavier in some spots, but also kind of balances it out with like the more gothy stuff. This is really fucking good. The opening track, History of Drowning, actually kicks this off in very energetic fashion. Like, it's definitely faster than I think most of the material that was on the last album. And I think this one might have like a little bit more variety to it. Like, you have more up-tempo songs. There are some like more straight up like kind of danceable goth songs. There's stuff that is very close, like Nine Inch Nails, and then there's also stuff that sounds more like, you know, industrial hardcore / punk bands like 16 Volt. But you also have like, you know, kind of more danceable songs like Incubate and Hermetics. Like, that's flat out like goth night fucking glow sticks and, you know, all that shit. Like, people dance with gas masks on. I used to hang out at goth nights. They were fucking fun. And those two songs in particular really fucking fit that vibe. This almost feels like $20 spin's answer to Author and Punisher over on Relapse Records. And it's really good, but it's kind of different in a way, like where I think Author and Punisher is more about like lush soundscapes and kind of the, you know, the fun novelty of all the fucking power tool, you know, instruments the dude makes. Like, I do think that's really cool, even though I feel like they're ultimately not super necessary, but they are awesome. But this kind of captures more of that old school sound, like in terms of like older industrial acts, and adds like a hefty dose of like fucking gnarly metal to it, especially on songs like Body World. Like, I think that one's an exceptionally heavy track. Now, this does have a remix on it for the song Incubate, and it kind of turns into like an old school like drum and bass sort of like remix, like almost kind of like Chemical Brothers, except they were working with Skinny Puppy. And I don't know, I kind of want to hear that happen, but I don't know if that ever will. Or it might have already happened and I just didn't know about it. I was really impressed with this, and I was reminded that this was coming out because the main dude behind this actually reached out to us and reminded me, like, oh yeah, our album's out. I was like, oh fuck, I gotta check that out. And there's so much stuff on fucking $20 spin anyway that, I mean, you know, it's always fun to go shopping there. But yeah, this is really fucking solid. If you're a big fan of like old school industrial metal, like you love like Frontline Assembly, especially Godflesh. Like, Godflesh is a big one, but also like Nine Inch Nails. Definitely check this out. This is just some fucking really cool, gnarly old school shit. Incantation, Tricennial of Blasphemy. This is a fucking 2-disc comp of rarities, new tracks, live tracks, a whole bunch of kick-ass shit to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Incantation. Many happy returns on that one. And I was stoked to get this one just because, well, there's like a whole bunch of shit that I have never heard, because some of this was only released on like splits or like the flexi discs for Decibel. So for a CD collector, having those finally all in one place is really awesome. And this does have 2 new tracks in here, Pest Savagery and Ordained by Night's Will, and both are fucking killer. In fact, pretty much everything on here is awesome, especially the first disc. The first disc has so many cool fucking rarities on it. You have like old school demos. You even have like some of the early raw demos for stuff like Diabolical Conquest, and I think they actually had maybe the vocalist before Daniel Corchado, which I don't know, that might have still been Craig Pillard. But yeah, you have like the Craig Pillard versions of the vocals on top of those tracks, and they sound fucking great. I think some of that is on the 1996 promo, which I had never heard that material too. You also have some covers on here. You have a cover of Degeneration, originally done by Revenant, which is a band I still need to get. I know that's Paul's band from Profanatica, like his old death metal act. I've jammed some tracks on YouTube. It's just hard finding that CD because it's pretty rare and people want a lot of money for it. But you also have a fucking blistering cover of Hell Awaits, originally done by Slayer, and they make it even more evil. I'm not entirely sure if it's John doing vocals on that one, since there were a lot of vocalists before John took over. But either way, the cover on it is absolutely awesome. And then you have the second disc, which has a lot of live tracks. Now, granted, I think it's cool because they pick different songs from like different eras and different times. Like there's some that were recorded in 2010, some like, you know, a few years later, different clubs and venues. But the issue is they all kind of sound like it's one continuous performance because they're all kind of mixed the same. I kind of wanted like a little bit of variety in the mix because like the acoustics in every building is a little bit different. They all kind of sound like they just kind of flattened out the mix just so it sounded nice. And I do appreciate that because all the musicianship comes out clearly, but I don't know, it's kind of missing like a bit of that aesthetic. Now there is a bit of a tracking issue on here. I think it's the track Subjugation Divine that is listed on here as the 17th track overall. It's actually missing that track on the CD version. I think it's still on the vinyl version, but I don't know why it was omitted on here. That sounds like more like maybe a manufacturing error because it is still listed on the packaging on here, but I just thought that was kind of odd. But overall, like, this is a great collection. The first disc is probably my favorite just because you have so much unreleased material that, again, I've never had a chance to jam, so there's a lot of fresh stuff in here. Like, this is like almost an entirely new album to me in terms of all the unreleased stuff together. And the second disc is awesome too, but I mean, this is Incantation. I love Incantation, and this is absolutely fucking fantastic. So yeah, if you're looking for a cool collection of Incantation, here it is. Go get it. It's fucking awesome. It's Incantation. How can it not be awesome? So yeah, check it out. All right, we have a strange one that I picked up. This is a collaboration between The Lord and Petra Haden, which The Lord is essentially Greg Anderson of Sun O and formerly of Goatsnake. Now this came out on Southern Lord Records this year, and I know there have been a lot of people telling me to check out The Lord's album, Forest Nocturne. Actually, I think it was Bassman. He was really adamant about it, and I forgot the name of the album he told me, and I saw this one, I was like, oh, it's that Lord band. I'm gonna get this. And I got maybe the wrong one, but this is still really interesting. Now, Petra Haden is a vocalist and violinist, and this is really interesting. Like, this is mostly guitars droning and violins and vocals that they don't say anything. Like, there's no lyrics. It's all just like vocal melodies, and it is extraordinarily haunting. This is like if the Melvins decided to do a haunted attraction someplace, because this is just, I don't know, creepy and kind of unsettling, but also kind of epic and triumphant in a way. There are almost no drums in here. Like, there's some percussive hits on the title track that opens it up, but I think after that, it is pretty much just, again, the droning riffs and the violin and the vocals, and somehow, like, it really does come together pretty well. I am not a big fan of Sun O. Like, I kind of think it just kind of drones on forever and it's just kind of boring. Like, if I want to do something that is drony, at least has to have like a beat to it or like a distinct riff, and often I just kind of get lulled into sleep by Sun. I know people fucking love them. They have kind of like a cult-like status, but I've never really been into them. But this was admittedly kind of interesting. Like, there's almost some like bluesy sort of like crooning to it. It almost is like a trance-inducing doom gospel album. Like, it's really, I don't know, like engaging in a way. It's kind of easy to get lost in it. But there are some interesting twists and turns in here. I can't remember which track it is, but there's a song on here that the vocal melody and the riffs almost kind of come together like a doom-laden cinematic cover of the Beatles' Eleanor Rigby. And there's almost some like Devin Townsend-esque like epicness to Ma and Sheila. It even has like a little bit of like Egyptian sort of like desert flair to it too. This is an odd listen, and I didn't necessarily know what to expect getting into this, and I still may check out Forest Nocturne, but I don't know, like, this is just really weird. Like, this isn't something I would listen to on a regular basis, but I don't know, like, it has its own appeal, and I did kind of like it. Like, this is just, again, strange, but it kind of works, and effectively very haunting. Like, this is almost something you put on just for pure atmosphere and not necessarily to focus on the music. Like, this is maybe background music. That almost sounds like a dig, but it really isn't, because, I don't know, like, this is just very interesting. I recommend checking this out. Again, I'm going to check out Forest Nocturne. I don't know if I'm going to buy it right away. I definitely want to, like, sit down and, like, get a good listen and decide whether or not I'm going to get it, because, again, like, the Sun thing, I'm just not, like, a big fan of that band. But I will check it out. But yeah, this was definitely interesting, and if you're looking for something pretty different on this list, this might be it. So yeah, check it out. All right, we have a pair here from Rhythm of Fear. We have their second EP, Ritual Dementia, and we have their second full-length, Fatal Horizons. And this is a crossover thrash slash just straight-up thrash metal act from Florida, and this is really interesting. Like, it definitely has crossover vibes, but there's also like the more intricate sound of like Bay Area thrash as well. Now I got these both at the same time, mainly because Thrash Maniac put up a review and I checked it out. I was like, man, this sounds really interesting. And I want to say he actually reminded me of this band not long before he did the review. And I decided to check it out, hit up their Bandcamp. I was like, dude, yeah, this sounds fucking great. Pretty much this is kind of like a combination of like power trip, but also with like old school Metallica and suicidal tendencies kind of wrapped into one. Especially on the EP. This EP is definitely a little bit more raw, and there's a lot of clean playing on here, which I thought was really interesting. The songs, again, a bit longer for crossover thrash. Like, you think crossover thrash, you think like Municipal Waste and shit like that, where the songs are maybe 2 minutes. They're loud, they're fast, there's lots of punky energy, and these songs are longer, but you still get some of that. I'd say out of all 6 tracks in here, the most crossover sounding song, like overall, is probably Slithering Madness. You get the machine gun guitars, there's definitely a lot of like fierce Slayer riffs in there, but you have gang vocals, there's definitely like a more punk energy to it. The vocals kind of bounce between like a more straightforward thrash delivery and kind of like more of a hardcore, like almost sort of Mike Muir delivery from Suicidal Tendencies. And they're tuneful too. Like, he's not just yelling, it's actually done with like, you know, some melody to it, which I think adds a lot to this, because there are a lot of like good melodic hooks on here. The production is also very old school, like, I mean, kind of more along the lines of like late 80s, early 90s, like not so much like early 80s thrash production. And overall, this just sounds really good. It's just interesting how this works as crossover, but it isn't necessarily kind of like following the rules of crossover. And overall, I think this is just a banger of an EP. It's just interesting to hear crossover thrash done in like more long form and kind of like combined with like, you know, like bands like Testament too. Really good. Now this one, their new album, is possibly even better. I like the production more. This has more of that crossover energy, and granted the songs are a bit longer, but there's like more of that sort of power trip vibe, albeit with maybe like a little bit more like melody. Like, the guitar solos aren't just dive bombs. There's lots of really, you know, intricate leads on here. I think the bass is more present on here. In fact, this opening song, Obsolescence, kicks off with a fucking isolated bass and then just kind of rips through. I think overall this stays more aggressive too, and I really like that. Like, there's more gang vocals, the riffs sound more bitey. There's still melody to them, but there's more of that sort of hardcore fucking anger, and holy shit, the breakdowns and the grooves on here are just fucking sick. I'd say this band is very comparable to like a band like Enforced, but there are some like different things that they do. Like, the opening to Simulated Times is almost kind of like cynic or atheist-ish. Like, there's a little bit more technical play and maybe like a little bit of death metal to their sound too there. And there's some really interesting themes and atmosphere on here. Like, I guess they delve kind of hard into like conspiracy theories and aliens and sci-fi. So this is like the audio equivalent of a Philip K. Dick novel. And there's weird interludes on here, but I think they're kind of interesting. Like, namely the 5th track, Atrocities Beyond the Structures of the Mind. It sounds like they made an obvious nod to Megadeth's Dawn Patrol, which is like my least favorite track on Rust in Peace, but it kind of works as like an interlude and a segue in between tracks. But overall, this is just some solid fucking thrash. Like, whether you call it crossover or just call it thrash metal, it definitely fucking fits under both banners. Either way, it's executed extraordinarily well, and I dig it. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more from this band. I've been jamming this one probably a little bit more than this one. I don't know, I just like the vibe of this one a little bit more, but I don't think you can really go wrong with either one, and I'm definitely going to try to hunt down their other albums as well, because this is just really fucking good. So if you've never heard of Ritual Fear and you're a big fan of like Power Trip, Enforced, I'd even throw Iron Age in there too, and shit like Testament and Exodus. Like, it's kind of all wrapped up together here, and it's all fucking awesome. So yeah, definitely check this band out. Tangerine Dream, Virgin Years, 1974 to 1978. This is a 3-disc comp, came out in 2011 from this legendary German synth band, ambient, I don't know what you want to call them, I would say just synth. This band is pretty legendary in terms of like their output. They have, I think, almost 100 studio albums, and that's not counting soundtracks, which they've done soundtracks for Risky Business, Firestarter, Legend, The Keep, like a whole bunch of really interesting films. And I got this because I've been bringing them up a lot, especially in reviews where there's lots of like cool spacey synth work, like the last Blood Incantation album that some of you liked, some of you really didn't. And I got this because this has been heavily recommended to me by Metal Madness 66. He brings up this band quite a bit when it comes down to anything synthy and spacey, and I can see why, because this is really fucking good. Now, this includes, well, 3 discs of a lot of music, and a lot of this is very long tracks of just spacey atmosphere, especially the Phaedra and Rubicon. Those are just all synth soundscapes. They're very lush, they're very sci-fi-ish, but they're also kind of haunting at times. And I really dug those, and I thought those were really cool because it's just perfect chill mood music, albeit like some spots that sound a little bit creepy. But when I got down to Ricochet and Stratosphere, those are the ones I really got into because they started adding some percussion, there's some light guitar in there, like some spacey, like, you know, Pink Floyd-y stuff in there. And Ricochet is live, I believe, and holy shit, they sounded great. Now granted, this was like back in the 70s, but man, these songs are just trance-inducing, and they move around, like very well orchestrated. There's a lot of cool peaks and valleys. They're very long-winded. Like, a lot of these tracks are over the 10-minute mark, some of them over the 20-minute mark, but they're very engaging. You can get kind of lost in them, and I absolutely love the atmosphere. And when it came down to Ricochet, the fact that there was a cool rhythm behind it, like I wasn't sort of kind of searching for a rhythm amongst the ether of synths and moogs and all that fun shit. And Stratosphere is kind of the same thing, except I think the guitars had a little bit more fun. There's like some more bluesy leads in there. Again, a lot of stuff that sounds very similar to Pink Floyd, especially like around like Animals and such. And the bulk of this is instrumental too. It wasn't until you got down to Cyclone on the 3rd disc where all of a sudden vocals are being introduced, and the vocals in here are kind of strange. Like, sometimes they're tunefully sung, like very much, again, kind of like Pink Floyd, like kind of like the Roger Waters delivery. But you have some like odd, almost harsh vocals. Like, they're not metal vocals, but they're not really like, you know, straightforward rock vocals where they're sung and tuneful. Like, he just sounds like he's saying things very aggressively, which I suppose you could say that, you know, that's also metal too. I don't know. It's just very different, and wasn't really expecting that, but I really like the songs though. And they are for the most part instrumental, but it was kind of cool to hear over the course of these CDs, like more dynamics introduced, but they still retained their core sound of these synthy fucking sonicscapes. Like, that's probably the best way I could describe this. I would even say the song Madrigal Meridian is almost just kind of prog rock, like it's just spacey prog rock. Now, this does contain like a lot of like extra stuff, like you have, you know, side 1 and side 2 of Rubicon, which honestly you have the entire 2 tracks that comprise Rubicon on the other disc. So some of this stuff feels like retread, like you have like excerpts from certain songs, like, oh yeah, we took, you know, this 5.5-minute section or 7-minute section out of this 20-minute song just so you can listen to that. And I do think that's cool. It makes it a little bit more digestible, but it kind of just felt like it was a bit extra just because, like, dude, this 3-disc set runs like shit, like almost 3.5 hours long. Like, this is a good chunk of a day to sit back and listen to this, which is one of the reasons why it took me a while to, you know, get to this collection update. This is a lot to fucking absorb, and I've gone back to it, and it's really fucking good. Like, I kind of want to get more by this, but according to Jeff, and I trust his wisdom on this, that this is probably the best of the bunch. But still, if I can find the other ones for such a good price, because I got this for maybe $10, I might actually hunt down the other ones. I don't know. But yeah, I did say I was going to get fiercely unmetal here towards the end, and this is about as unmetal as I could possibly get, unless I pulled out like a country album, which that's not going to happen. But yeah, this is really fucking good. Like, if you love like dungeon synth and like spacey fucking synths and shit, this is probably the band that has influenced that sound possibly the most, especially when it comes down to like cinematic stuff. excellent collection. This is a really fucking wild listen. Again, not metal, but it's kind of heavy in a different sense. I make that excuse for a lot of non-metal stuff I cover in here, but this is really good. So yeah, definitely check this out. Rush, Power Windows. It's the 11th album from this fucking legendary fucking band, Canadian prog rock. I think everyone knows Rush in here. Came out in 1985, and this is definitely at the heart of their synthier era, and I dig this. Like, this is one I've been meaning to get. I've been trying to patch up all the holes in my Rush discography, and I have most of the classic stuff. It's a lot of the mid-80s and some of the 90s stuff that I'm missing, but this one's been on my radar for a while, and I'm super glad I got this because this is an awesome album. It is definitely very washed out in synths. There are synths everywhere in here, almost to the point where it kind of hurts the guitar work, and I love Alex Lifeson's guitar work, but you know, sometimes I think the synths are a bit much, but man, the songwriting is fantastic. The opening track, The Big Money, is just hook city. The bass lines on here stand out so well. I think this is a remaster, but man, dude, the production here is absolutely fantastic. You can hear everything. Well, occasionally you can't hear Alex's guitars just because the synths are going full bore, but they're still there and they're still contributing because he's doing more like atmospheric stuff. Like, this is maybe less riffy in spots and more about like kind of creating the atmosphere. And I mean, Geddy and Neil are doing all sorts of crazy shit. Like, I'm always a giant fan of Neil's drum work. Like, there's a lot of cool, like bouncy, almost like reggae rhythms in here. But I mean, he's doing his, you know, lavish prog stuff, the gallops, his intense fills. It's fucking Rush. And Geddy's bass work, especially, again, Big Money, and I would say Marathon. Marathon has like a really cool fucking distinct bass line on it. But the main thing in here for me is the catchy songwriting. Like, there's songs in here that just have insanely good hooks. Emotion Detector, in particular, that song is absolutely infectious. And again, this is not necessarily metal because it's Rush. You know, they're not necessarily a metal band, but they do contribute heavily to hard rock and immensely fucking influential. I was super stoked to find this one. In terms of like the albums I'm missing, this was probably one of the big ones. You know, all the classic stuff, of course, like Hemispheres and fucking, you know, Self-Titled, 2112, like, you know, got those, had those for years. And I love that era. But, you know, the song about the 80s era I think is just really interesting. Like, starting with like, you know, Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures, like, I don't know, they found like a second wind in their career and came out with some amazing stuff. Well, I mean, at least up until Presto. I'm still not a big fan of that one, but I don't know, maybe I need to go back to that one. But yeah, this album is fucking amazing. Again, it's Synth City, and I think Alex kind of, you know, suffers for it a bit, but I still think he does a great job in here just sort of contributing to the atmosphere, and I think that's just like sort of a big part of this. That and just the amazing fucking hooky songs. So yeah, if you've never jammed this album by Rush, it's fucking awesome, and I would say a little bit underrated. So yeah, check it out. And finally, we have Saga, Worlds Apart. This is their 4th album, came out in 1981, and this is another Canadian prog rock band, and they do sound kind of remarkably like Rush, especially on this album. Now, this is yet another recommendation that came to me from Metal Madness. Jeff kind of knows this shit when it comes down to like interesting prog bands and 80s bands. We've definitely bonded over Killing Joke, and I think there's a little bit of that on here too. This is very much kind of akin to like 80s Rush. Like, it's synth driven, but there's kind of heavier guitars in there, cool syncopated rhythms. He told me to check out the song On the Loose, and it's like, oh, you'll probably recognize it. And admittedly, I didn't. Like, I've never heard of this song. I actually looked up the music video, and the entire time I was watching, I was like, dude, why the fuck is this dude wearing knee pads? I don't get it. It's the 80s. The 80s were weird, but this band has a really cool sound. Like, it's definitely prog rock, but like 80s style, like kind of very similar to 80s Rush, 80s Yes, and again, to some degree, Killing Joke, because there are some slightly heavier moments on here, like not metal heavy, just kind of heavier than the usual sort of like poppiness, because there's a big focus on like huge hooks on here. On the Loose is immediately infectious, even though I think the keyboards kind of sound like, you know, Christmas Time in Progville or wherever the fuck they are, Canada. The songs like Amnesia are just very catchy. Like, it has that 80s pop sort of like sensibility to the songwriting, while they're still being kind of like a little bit more technical and a little bit more flashy, and like the lead play and maybe some of the drum work. The songs are constructed well, despite being very synthy. The guitars are very present. I just like this. Like, this is just something I probably would have enjoyed when I was younger, just getting into like 80s music, like, you know, along with like the Cars and Hall & Oates and shit. albeit this is like a little bit more cerebral. I mean, maybe a lot more cerebral, but still just as much fun. I mean, as much as I hung out in arcades as a kid, a lot of the sounds they use in the keyboard settings would have been very fucking familiar, because I swear, like, there's moments on here where, like, you know, yeah, we got a good pop hook, and then all of a sudden it sounds like they're playing Qbert in the background. It's like, nah, fuck it, record it. It'll sound like the 80s. And I'm sure you probably noticed I have a different album cover up there. That is, I believe, the original cover. This was the one that came out for the US, and I was like, that looks like every 80s cover. Like, I think so many 80s album covers had some chick in sunglasses. Like, let's get the one that looks a little bit more mysterious. I mean, it's still kind of odd, but I like it better than this one. But yeah, this was really good. So you got another solid recommendation, Jeff. This was a lot of fun and definitely appealed to not only my love of like prog rock and prog metal, but also like 80s pop, and I'm still a giant sucker for that. If you've never jammed this, I recommend checking it out. If I can find the entire album, I might put it up, but I might just put up the On the Loose single just because knee pads. Just, yeah, I don't know why they're there, but they are, and it's just a very entertaining song anyway. So yeah, definitely check this out. All right, that is it for this massive collection update. This was probably one of the largest ones I've done just in terms of all the shit I've talked about. I've been down here in this basement for a while. I'm sure if you were paying attention in the background, you've been slowly seeing the sun setting, so this took quite a while. But this was a lot of fun. I still enjoy the living shit out of this. It was good to like go over the stuff that was sent to us. A lot of killer fucking music out there, and it was good to kind of like get away from the metal towards the end and kind of mix it up a little bit, because I mean, I love fucking cool 80s music, and apparently 70s music too, with that Tangerine Dream set. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is in there, as well as our store. We do have t-shirts. We are currently out of extra larges, so we will have to get those back. But we still have all the other sizes, and we will be introducing some other material in there at some point. We're still kind of testing out stuff. I know it's kind of slow going, but we'll get there. And of course, thank you all so much for liking, subscribing, commenting, all that stuff. I recently went to go see Cannibal Corpse. This is literally the day after I went to saw Cannibal Corpse in Cleveland, and ran into a couple of fans there, and it's just awesome fucking hearing from you guys. I got to, you know, BS with some of them. It's really kind of surreal. Like, I still kind of a difficult time processing that there's like any sort of like bit of fame with us. But I have to say, I enjoy it. Like, there's not like, you know, a big celebrity fucking mode with me. Like, I'm literally just a dude that listens to entirely too much music in his basement, but I'm glad you guys are getting some enjoyment out of it, and I'm glad you're finding a lot of cool shit in here. It is absolutely amazing to fucking do this, and yeah, I want to keep doing it because this is just fucking awesome, and you guys are like the main reason. So once again, thank you all so much for everything, and we will catch you later.